Hello, I'm Rodian. Today I'll be talking about waste reduction. Now, before I go into my project, I'll just talk about the background. So the basics, what is waste reduction? Then I'll talk about the history and then how it's used today. Now, waste reduction is basically what the title says. You're not returning anything hazard hazardous to the environment, and you're managing the waste disposal. And one of the ways you could actually do this is just by recycling, reusing, and composting. So like recycling plastic bags, reusing the bags, and composting. You're just reusing your food. You're just putting it back into the soil to allow something to grow in. Um, and there are other ways of waste management. These are landfilling, burning, and dumping. These are just one of the most common ones. And these could actually be very harmful to the environment, potentially harmful to the environment. Um, Landfilling toxic chemicals that are produced by organic materials in the garbage, they could leak into the ground and then affect the groundwater and affect your drinking water. And burning of organic material that can be found in trash. This could release a lot of harmful gases into the atmosphere. Then you breathe this in. This could even affect public health. Then there are other types of harmful gases like methane, which is highly explosive and highly flammable. And then you have the dumping, which is done by a lot of third world countries still, of plastic or garbage into the ocean. And this is very bad for the environment just because it affects the organisms that are in the ocean, which then affects nutrient cycles, and then affecting our environment, affecting our public health. Now, going just into the history, early people like Native Americans, early Mayan civilizations, they didn't really care too much about trash. It wasn't really trash that they had just because it was reusable or it wasn't something that was very harmful to harmful to the environment. It wasn't really what you would call waste. Um, they like Mayans, they just probably covered it up with dirt within their huts or just put it under rugs or anything like that. Native Americans, they just left behind the bones of buffaloes just to be absorbed back into the ground and then back into nutrient cycles. And just because of this, it was not too much of a problem. But then as people became to industrialize, they began to live more closely together in cities and using more materials. This kind of created more problems, and more problems just because um, this was creating habitats for diseases to spread into. In 312 BC, the Tiber River in early Rome was polluted by people. This created raw sewage, it contaminated drinking water, and this was just done just by unsanitary living. And then in 1817, there was the first cholera pandemic in which originated in Bengal in India and then spread to northern and then western nations. And this was the infection of the small intestine, which caused a very um, bad cause in your body. And this was mainly caused by the Vibrio cholerae, by the bacterium Vibrio cholerae, and but the main cause of spread was just unsanitary living and polluting the river. And 1347, sorry, I put this after 1817. 1347, the bubonic plague hit Europe, and this killed over 20 million people, which is at that time about one third of the continent. And the main cause of this, again, was a bacterium Yersinia pestis, but it was hosted inside of a rat, many rats, and these were all from these all originated from Asia. But then what really attracted them was just people in Europe. They threw the garbage out into the streets, and this attracted all the rats, and then people then became in contact with the rats, and this spread the disease and killed a lot of people. Now, as you can see, there are problems of inefficient waste disposal. Early people didn't really have to worry about it, but then as people began building more things. This created more synthetics. This created a lot of environments. People began living more together and having very unsanitary conditions. This creates a lot of problems like toxic chemicals that can contaminate groundwater or just anything, just creating habitats that cause disease, which also contaminates the water. Then you have air, which is unbreathable in the environment. People can't really breathe it in just because it might be full of viruses, it might be full of diseases. Um, and again, this could also be harmful to the environment just by the gases that are produced. And then you have outbreaks of disease. Again, the cholera outbreaks or the bubonic plague. Now, today, these are still common managements of disposal, these three: landfilling, burning, dumping. And again, as I mentioned earlier, landfilling, it's bad for the groundwater, contaminates it. Burning, carbon emissions can be, as a result, creates very harmful gas that is bad for breathing. Then you have dumping, which then messes with the ocean's environment and then consequently affecting our environment, and all these affect our public health. Just a little bit of more of geography. Um, in 2010, China was the most contributor to the ocean and following the other nations, but 5 billion pounds of plastic was contributed to the ocean. Just that's just really bad for the environment. Then you have, sorry, this graph doesn't really say where it is, but I took this off of a site that talked about developing countries like Africa. They mostly use landfill rather than recycle, which again is potentially hazardous to the environment by creating toxic chemicals which contaminate groundwater. And then you have many countries today which just waste food rather than reusing it as compost. So like North America, us 42%, that's a lot. Then 25% industrial Asia, and so on and so on. What the main goal of my project was just to raise awareness. As you could see, that a lot of countries are still using very primitive methods of just managing waste, and I want to raise awareness on how you just reduce waste. You could actually reuse items. And I kind of just set up a recycling bin in the kitchen, just not telling anybody, just because I want people to see the bin and then be aware of the bin and just what it does, just have their ideas for them, just to throw paper in there. So I have 6 people in the family, and what I did was just counted paper. The first week, November 2nd till November 8th, counted the amount of papers each day. And then the second week, November 9th till the 15th, counted the accumulation on the last day, just because I already got what I probably just needed. And so this is what I needed. I wanted to see this increase. So as you see, the first couple of days, two, three, there wasn't really too much recognition of the bin. But then Thursday, Friday, it dramatically increased from 7 to 11. And so this was like the point. I think people started realizing that um, it was very efficient to use the bin. I didn't tell anybody to throw anything in there. I just set it up, and people just threw it in there. Um, and this really does show something. And this just comparison from, as you saw, the second week had only 29 pages collected on the last day, and it's 33. And just this just shows that there's probably like maybe 30 pages per week average that is to be recycled. And after the project, just asked family general questions like, "What did you think?" My brother replied, "It would make sense to just throw the paper into the bin rather than into a bag. It's not only convenient to throw paper in there instead of stuffing it in a bag, but also helpful for the environment." And so I kind of realized that this bin kind of just raised awareness. It was there and people saw it, and it kind of, I wouldn't say maybe forced, but brought them an idea to enact in something, just to recycle, just to throw the paper into there. And so I see that it could actually produce a message. People can realize what needs to be done. But I'm not saying just to go out and set up a very large recycling bin just for so everybody could realize, but starting small, just something in your home might be the best option. And so I'd spread this awareness just doing what I just initially did in the beginning, just teaching them about how these type of methods of managing waste can be very harmful. And so you want to kind of reduce this type of management or at least better the way we handle our things, our waste, and not make it waste. So, like items like plastic bags, we can recycle them, plastic bottles, um, paper, and so, you can spread this awareness by just maybe just telling somebody to set up this experiment in their home just to try it for themselves. Talking about this experiment, just saying what was produced, people realize that there was a bin there and then enact it into something. And then tell people the issues that may arise. As I mentioned earlier, just give them the background information, maybe even give them the history. Uh, if they don't get too bored. And then just teach them then ways to reduce the waste, just in case if they just say, okay, okay, you convinced me. This looks like probably a good way to go. Just tell somebody to bring reusable bags to stores, choosing returnable and reusable items, composting food, and buying in bulk, which reduces waste and saves money. And that's pretty much it. That's what the goal of the project was. And thank you for watching.